I stood frozen in my Seattle loft, the glow of my phone screen burning my eyes as the words sank in. No room for you at the Whistler retreat this year, darling. My mother's text hit like a sucker punch, the kind that steals your breath and leaves your chest hollow. It wasn't just the words, it was the timing. Tomorrow, I'd be presenting my biggest project yet, a virtual reality experience for a Hollywood studio that could redefine my career. And here, on the eve of my triumph, my parents had chosen to remind me I wasn't wanted. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through X, where my brother James had carelessly posted a photo of the Whistler Retreat's guest list. Looked down the house in a hallway. 150 names, distant cousins, corporate tycoons, even my ex-fiancé Ryan, who'd left me 2 years ago for a better fit in Silicon Valley. Everyone but me. Sophia Bennett, the black sheep of the Bennett dynasty. The loft was silent except for the hum of my VR rig in the corner, its blinking lights mocking my solitude. I'd built a life most people only dreamed of, a cutting-edge VR design agency with clients from gaming giants to Oscar-winning directors. Yet no matter how many awards I won or headlines I made, my parents, Charles and Victoria Bennett, saw me as a failure for choosing art over their empire of tech and finance. The Whistler Retreat, a tradition started by my grandparents Margaret and Henry, was supposed to be sacred, a week of family laughter and connection in the snowy mountains of British Columbia. But for the 3rd year running, I'd been erased from the guest list, my absence excused with lies about no space. It tossed my phone onto the couch and paced the hardwood floor, my bare feet cold against the polished grain. The Seattle skyline glittered outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, a reminder of the city I'd conquered on my own terms. But tonight that victory felt hollow. I opened my laptop, driven by a reckless impulse, and logged into the family's private email server. A trick I'd learned in art school when I'd dabbled in coding to protect my designs. My heart raced as I bypassed the weak security. Thanks, Dad, for never updating your passwords. There it was, a spreadsheet titled Whistler 2025. 150 names meticulously organized with notes on accommodations across 3 rented estates. 3. They'd leased entire properties to fit their bloated guest list, yet somehow there was no room for their own daughter. The betrayal cut deeper when I saw Ryan's name, highlighted in bold with a note, VIP Charles to discuss merger. Ryan, the man who'd called my dreams cute before leaving me for a tech heiress, was now my parents' honored guest, poised to pitch a rival VR project that could tank my studio. My stomach churned. This wasn't just exclusion, it was sabotage. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse hammering in my ears. That's when the notification popped up, a tabloid headline forwarded by an anonymous source screaming, Bennett heiress snubbed from family's elite retreat. A disgruntled former employee fired for leaking client data had sold my humiliation to the press. My phone buzzed again. Clients concerned about the scandal were pulling back. If this story gained traction, my studio could lose millions. I sank onto the couch, my breath shallow, as memories of Whistler flooded back. I was 10, bundled in a parka, sketching the jagged peaks with the drawing tablet Grandpa Henry had given me, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You see the world in colors we can't, Sophia," he'd said, his voice warm like the campfires we'd build on the estate's frozen lake. Grandma Margaret would braid my hair while telling stories of their first winter in Whistler, when they'd fallen in love under a blanket of stars. The estate, with its cedar beams and stone fireplaces, was their legacy, a place where family meant everything. But after their car spun out on an icy road 7 years ago, that legacy warped. My parents turned the retreat into a corporate circus, a showcase for Charles's tech empire and Victoria's socialite ambitions. My siblings, James, Elizabeth, the twins Daniel and Michael, Claire and Lily, fell in line, chasing careers that fit the Bennett mold: tech, law, medicine, marketing. I was the odd one out, the artist who dared to defy them. My phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail from my mother. "Sophia, darling, we're keeping it intimate this year. You understand, don't you?" Her voice dripped with false sweetness, the kind that made my skin crawl. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Intimate? 150 guests, including a journalist hired to spin the event as a perfect family legacy? I scrolled through X again, where my sister Elizabeth had posted a teaser, Whistler 2025, biggest yet, honored to host industry giants. The comments were flooded with praise, none mentioning me. I was invisible, erased from my own family's story. That's when the real blow came. My laptop screen flickered and a red message blazed across it. "Your files are encrypted. Pay $50,000 0 cents in Bitcoin or lose everything." Ransomware. I'd been so reckless diving into the family server that I hadn't noticed the trap. My client files, years of work for studios and startups, were locked. My agency's survival hung by a thread. I called Mia, my best friend and a cybersecurity genius who'd saved my ass more times than I could count. "Sophia, what the hell did you do?" she said, her voice sharp but concerned. I spilled everything: the text, the guest list, Ryan, the tabloid leak. "This isn't just your parents being assholes," she said. "They're trying to break you, and someone's targeting your business." Mia's words lit a fire in me. I could confront my parents, storm their retreat, and demand answers. But that's what they wanted. Me groveling, proving I was the unstable artist they'd always labeled me. Instead, I made a decision that felt both insane and inevitable. "I'm done begging for their approval," I told Mia. "I'm hosting my own retreat. Same week, same town. And it's going to blow theirs out of the water." She laughed, a mix of shock and admiration. "You're crazy, but I'm in. Let's make them regret ever crossing you." The next morning, I threw myself into research, fueled by coffee and rage. Whistler was packed with luxury estates, but one caught my eye: Blackcomb Chalet, a glass and steel masterpiece 10 minutes from my family's property. It had panoramic views, a private ice rink, and a heated infinity pool overlooking the mountains. The price tag, $50,000 0 cents for the week, made my stomach lurch. I'd been saving for a new studio space, but this felt bigger. This was my chance to reclaim my place, not just in my family, but in my own story. I wired the deposit, my hands shaking as I drained my emergency fund. If this failed, I'd be broke, my reputation in tatters. I called Rachel, my event planner friend who'd turned tech launches into global spectacles. Over lunch at a bustling Seattle cafe, I laid out my plan. A visionary creators summit, a week of workshops, art, and innovation that would rival my parents' corporate charade. "You're not just throwing a party," Rachel said, her eyes gleaming. "You're declaring war. I love it." She pulled strings to secure a Michelin-starred chef, a drone photographer, and a lineup of artists who'd lead sessions on augmented reality and immersive storytelling. I invited 25 guests, friends, clients, and my siblings Claire and James, who'd occasionally shown flickers of support. The guest list was a rebellion in itself, people who valued me for my vision, not my conformity. But the stakes kept rising. A major client, a gaming studio worth $10 million 0 cents in contracts, emailed me an ultimatum: deliver their VR prototype during the retreat week or they'd walk. I was already stretched thin, planning the summit while fighting the ransomware. Mia worked around the clock to decrypt my files, but the clock was ticking. Then came the first real scare. Driving to a meeting with Rachel, my SUV skidded on a rain-slicked road as another car swerved dangerously close, nearly forcing me off a cliff. The driver's face was obscured, but the intent felt clear. Someone didn't want my summit to happen. I pushed forward, designing a website for the summit that screamed sophistication. Clean lines, bold visuals, and a tagline: "Create your own legacy." I posted teasers on X, knowing my siblings would see them. Claire texted immediately, "This looks incredible, Soph. I'm in." James declined, citing his kids, but his tone was warm, almost apologetic. The rest of my siblings stayed silent, but my parents' reaction was swift. A text from Victoria: "What's this nonsense about a retreat? You're embarrassing the family." I didn't respond. Let them stew. A week before the summit, disaster struck. The catering company canceled, claiming a double booking. I smelled sabotage. My parents had connections deep enough to pull strings like that. I sat on my loft floor, surrounded by half-assembled welcome packages, fighting panic. Mia came through again, connecting me with Elena, a chef who'd trained under Gordon Ramsay. Her menus, featuring molecular gastronomy and local ingredients, elevated the summit to a new level. But the relief was short-lived. An avalanche warning hit Whistler, forcing me to reroute guests through a treacherous mountain pass. I spent sleepless nights coordinating logistics, my nerves fraying as the tabloid story gained traction online. The final blow came when I discovered a mole among my guests. A rival designer, secretly working with Brian, had RSVP'd to steal my VR concepts for his pitch at my parents' retreat. I couldn't kick them out without proof, so I tightened security, hiring a private firm to sweep the chalet for bugs. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. Why was Ryan at my parents' retreat? What deal were they brokering? And who had sent the anonymous X message warning me to cancel or face consequences? The day before the summit, I drove to Whistler, my SUV packed with supplies. The mountain roads were slick with ice, and I gripped the wheel, half expecting another car to run me off the road. When I pulled into Blackcomb Chalet's driveway, the sight stole my breath. Glass walls reflected the snow-capped peaks, and the infinity pool shimmered under the setting sun. I walked through the chalet alone, trailing my fingers along the marble counters, feeling the weight of what I'd built. This wasn't just a retreat. It was my defiance, my declaration that I was enough. I spent the evening assembling welcome packages. Custom VR headsets engraved with the summit logo, artisanal coffee from a local roaster, and handwritten notes thanking each guest for believing in me. For Claire's package, I included a sketch we'd drawn together as kids, a memory of simpler times. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Enjoying your little stunt, Sophia? You're only hurting yourself." I snapped a photo of the chalet's view, mountains glowing under a crimson sky, and posted it on X with the caption, "Building my own empire. No room, no problem. Let 'em see. Let them choke on it." The first guests arrived at noon, Mia in her beat-up Jeep, followed by Alex, a drone photographer with a cult following. Their gasps as they entered the chalet mirrored my own. "Sophia, this is unreal," Mia said, spinning to take in the soaring ceilings. By sunset, all 25 guests were there, including Claire, who hugged me tightly. "I had no idea you were this badass," she whispered. The energy was electric, artists, tech innovators, and creators buzzing with ideas. Elena's team served a 5-course dinner on the chalet's terrace, fairy lights twinkling above us. I raised a glass, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "To creating our own spaces, our own legacies. Then came the shock. As we sipped wine, a sleek black SUV pulled up. My great-aunt Margaret, my grandparents' reclusive sister and a tech pioneer in her own right, stepped out. At 82, she was a legend, her sharp eyes scanning the chalet with approval. "I saw your post," she said, her voice gravelly. "This is more my speed than your parents' circus." I stared, speechless. Why was she here? What did she know about my parents' plans? Her presence felt like a chess move in a game I didn't fully understand. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts from my siblings. James, "What's this about a retreat? Looks insane." Elizabeth, "Mom's freaking out. Why's Claire there?" Daniel, "Didn't know you had it in you." The subtext was clear. They were rattled, caught off guard by my audacity. But the real storm hit at noon. My parents' Mercedes rolled into the driveway, their faces thunderous. I met them outside, refusing to let them disrupt my guests. "What the hell are you doing, Sophia?" Charles barked. "You're making a mockery of our family." I crossed my arms, my voice ice cold. "You invited 150 people, including my ex, who's trying to steal my business. You rented 3 estates. Don't talk to me about space." Victoria's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "We thought you were too busy with your little projects." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "My little projects power half the VR industry. You'd know that if you ever bothered to ask." For the first time, I saw my father falter, his gaze flicking to the chalet where my guests laughed and collaborated. "Who are these people?" he asked. "My family," I said simply, "the one I chose." They stayed for dinner, stiff and out of place among my vibrant guests. Margaret's presence forced them to behave, but the tension was palpable. As Elena served dessert, Charles leaned toward me. "We were wrong, Sophia." "I'm sorry." The words were clumsy, foreign coming from him. I nodded, but didn't soften. "You can join us tomorrow, as guests, not as parents trying to control me." They left in silence, and I felt a weight lift. Not forgiveness, but power. That night, Margaret pulled me aside, her eyes glinting with secrets. "Your grandparents would be proud," she said. "But there's something you need to know about the family trust." She lowered her voice, and my pulse quickened. What was she hiding? And why had a guest left a coded note in their welcome package, hinting at a conspiracy tied to my parents' retreat? As I stood on the chalet's terrace, the mountains looming under a starlit sky, I knew this was just the beginning. I'd built something unstoppable, but the real battle for my legacy, my truth, and my place was far from over. The air in Blackcomb Chalet crackled with possibility as I stood on the glass-walled terrace, watching the first guests arrive under a sky bruised with the threat of snow. My Visionary Creators Summit was no longer just a plan. It was real, alive, a rebellion carved from the pain of my family's rejection. 25 creators, artists, tech innovators, dreamers streamed into the chalet, their voices echoing off the polished cedar beams. Mia, my cybersecurity lifeline, pulled up in her Jeep, her grin fierce as she hauled a crate of tech gear. Claire, my sister, arrived next, her surgeon's composure cracking into awe as she took in the chalet's infinity pool shimmering against the Whistler peaks. "Sophia, this is next level," she said, hugging me tightly. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was overshadowed by the weight of what I'd risked to make this happen. My savings, my reputation, my sanity. The $50,000 0-cent rental fee for the chalet had gutted my emergency fund, and the high-risk loan I'd taken to cover catering, workshops, and security was a noose around my neck. If this summit failed, my VR studio, years of sweat and sleepless nights, would collapse. Worse, My parents' private investigator was sniffing around, having uncovered my hack into their email server. The legal threat loomed like a storm cloud, and the ransomware locking my client files was still unresolved, with Mia racing against time to decrypt them. Then there was the near miss on the mountain road, the black sedan that had tried to run me off the cliff. Was it random? Or was someone, maybe Ryan, my ex-fiancé, or even my parents, trying to stop me? I pushed the paranoia aside as I handed out welcome packages, each one a labor of love. Custom VR headsets engraved with the Summit logo, artisanal coffee from a Whistler roaster, and handwritten notes that poured out my gratitude. For Claire, I'd tucked in a sketch we'd made as kids, a clumsy drawing of the Whistler estate's frozen lake. Her eyes softened as she opened it. "I forgot how much we used to create together," she whispered. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. This summit wasn't just about proving my parents wrong. It was about reclaiming the parts of me they'd tried to erase. Elena, the Michelin-starred chef Mia had found, was already in the kitchen, her team transforming local ingredients into dishes that looked like art. The scent of roasted venison and truffle foam wafted through the chalet, mingling with the piney air. Rachel, my event planner friend, buzzed around like a general, coordinating the setup for tomorrow's workshops, augmented reality design sessions, drone photography hikes, and ice sculpting on the chalet's private ring. She'd pulled every string in her network to make this happen, securing artists like Zara, a sculptor whose installations had graced the Venice Biennale, and Leo, a drone cinematographer who'd shot for National Geographic. "This is going to be legendary," Rachel said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the challenge, but her words were cut short by a text from Mia. "Found something in the ransomware code. It's not random. Someone targeted you specifically." My stomach dropped. Targeted? By whom? Ryan, who was at my parents' retreat, plotting to steal my VR tech? Or my parents themselves, desperate to keep me in line? Before I could process it, a low rumble shook the chalet. Guests froze, their laughter dying as the lights flickered. "Avalanche warning," Rachel said, checking her phone. "The pass we rerouted guests through is at risk." My heart pounded. I'd spent nights mapping safe routes after the initial warning, but the mountain was unpredictable. If the pass closed, half my guests could be stranded. Or worse. I called the property manager, who assured me the chalet was safe, but I couldn't shake the image of snow crashing down, burying everything I'd built. As the first day unfolded, the chalet buzzed with creative energy. Guests mingled, swapping ideas over glasses of local Pinot Noir. Zara set up her sculpting tools on the terrace, while Leo tested his drones, their hum blending with the wind. I led a tour of the chalet, pointing out the glass-walled studio where we'd hold AR workshops and the heated deck for late-night stargazing. Claire stayed close, her presence a quiet anchor. "I didn't realize how much I missed this," she said, gesturing at the group. "Mom and Dad's retreats are all business deals and fake smiles." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. The guest, a designer named Ethan, lingered too long near my VR prototypes, his questions too pointed. Mia had flagged him as a potential mole linked to Ryan's company. Was he here to steal my tech for Ryan's pitch at my parents' retreat? That night, as Alina's team served a 5-course meal on the terrace, I posted a cryptic update on X, building my own empire, no room, no problem. The response was immediate. Likes and comments flooded in, but so did texts from my siblings. James: "Looks insane, Soph. Wish I could have made it." Elizabeth: "Mom's pissed." "Why's Claire there?" Daniel: "Didn't know you had this in you." Their words stung, but I focused on the guests around me. their laughter and ideas filling the void my family had left. Then a shadow crossed the terrace. Great Aunt Margaret, my grandparents' reclusive sister, stood at the edge of the group, her silver hair catching the fairy lights. At 82, she was a tech legend, having pioneered encryption software in the ADS. "I saw your post," she said, her voice sharp but warm. "Your parents' retreat is a circus. This is the real deal." Her arrival sent a jolt through me. Why was she here, uninvited, defying my parents? She'd always been the family rebel, but this felt bigger, like she knew something I didn't. As we sat by the fire, she leaned in, her eyes glinting. "Your grandparents would have loved this," she said. "Baby saw your fire, Sophia. But there's something about the family trust you need to know." She paused, glancing at the guests. "Not here. Tomorrow." My pulse raced. What secret was she hiding? And why did it feel like a bomb waiting to detonate? Sleep was impossible. I tossed in the chalet's master suite, the glass walls reflecting the moonlit peaks. The coded note I'd found in Ethan's welcome package haunted me. "Cancel the summit, or the truth comes out." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the words vague but menacing. Was it about my hack into the family server? Or something deeper, tied to Margaret's cryptic hint? At 3 a.m., Mia texted, "Ransomware source traced to a server in Vancouver. It's close." Vancouver was an hour from Whistler. Whoever was targeting me was nearby, maybe even at my parents' retreat. The next morning, the avalanche warning escalated. Local authorities closed the main pass, forcing me to reroute late arrivals through a narrow, icy back road. I hired a local guide to escort them, but the risk gnawed at me. If anything happened to my guests, the summit, and my career would be over. As I coordinated logistics, Ethan approached, his smile too slick. "Impressive setup, Sophia. Mind if I test your VR rig?" I deflected, keeping him at arm's length, but his persistence set off alarms. Mia was digging into his background, but we had no proof, yet. The day's workshops kicked off with a bang. Zara led an ice sculpting session on the frozen lake, her chainsaw carving a phoenix that mirrored my own rebirth. Leo's drone photography hike captured the peaks in stunning clarity, and my AR design session had guests buzzing with ideas for new projects. Claire joined in, her hands clumsy but eager as she tinkered with a VR headset. "I forgot what it feels like to create," she admitted, her eyes bright. For a moment, I saw the sister I'd lost to our parents' expectations, but the moment shattered when my phone rang. My mother's number. "Sophia, where are you?" Victoria's voice was a blade, sharp with controlled fury. "Margaret was supposed to be at our retreat, but she's vanished. What have you done?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "She's here, Mom. She chose my summit." Silence, then a hiss. "You're in Whistler? This is unacceptable." I cut her off, my voice low and firm. "I know about the 150 guests." "The 3 estates?" Ryan's pitch. "Stop lying to me." She hung up, but I knew what was coming. An hour later, their Mercedes screeched into the driveway, my father's face red with rage, my mother's eyes cold as ice. I met them outside, the wind whipping my hair as I stood my ground. "What the hell is this, Sophia?" Charles roared. "You're humiliating us." I didn't flinch. "You humiliated me first. You invited my ex to sabotage my business, rented estates to fit everyone but me, and hired a journalist to sell your perfect family lie." Victoria's face paled, but she rallied. "We thought you were too busy with your hobby." The word was a slap, but I laughed, sharp and unyielding. "My hobby runs half the VR industry. These people," I gestured at the chalet, where Zara's laughter rang out, "they're my family now. They see Charles's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Margaret appeared, her presence commanding. "Enough, Charles," she said. "You've excluded her for years. Your parents would be ashamed." The air shifted, my parents' confidence cracking. I invited them to dinner, not as parents but as guests. 7 o'clock, I said, turning back to the chalet. As I walked away, Margaret whispered, "The trust isn't what you think. There's a clause your parents buried." My heart skipped. What was she talking about? Dinner was a triumph. Elena's dishes, from caviar-topped scallops to deconstructed pavlova, left guests speechless. A tech billionaire, one of my clients, toasted my vision, his words echoing across the terrace. My parents sat stiffly, out of place among the creators, but Margaret's presence kept them in check. As dessert was served, Charles leaned toward me, his voice low. "We were wrong, Sophia. I'm sorry." The apology was raw, forced by the weight of Margaret's gaze and the undeniable success around him. I nodded, but didn't bend. "You can stay tomorrow, as guests. This is my space." After they left, Margaret pulled me to the study, locking the door. "The trust," she said, her voice urgent, "has a clause your grandparents added. If the Whistler estate is used against their vision, family, creativity, connection, control reverts to the heir who upholds it. That's you?" My breath caught. Was she saying I could claim the estate? "Your parents buried it, hoping you'd never know no," she continued. "They're planning to sell it to Ryan's company for a merger." The room spun. My parents weren't just excluding me, they were erasing my grandparents' legacy. Before I could respond, Mia burst in. "Ethan's gone. He stole a VR prototype and slipped out." My blood ran cold. Ethan, the mole, had what he needed for Ryan's pitch. I called security, but he was already gone, likely headed to my parents' retreat. The stakes were higher than ever. If Ryan's pitch succeeded, my studio could lose everything. As I rallied the team to track him, a guest handed me a second coded note, slipped into their welcome package. "The summit ends, or the estate burns." My hands shook. Was this Ryan, my parents, or someone else, lurking in the shadows? The next day, Daniel arrived uninvited, his investment banker's swagger replaced by something softer. "I'm jealous, Soph," he admitted, watching Zara's workshop. "You broke free." "I never did." His words hit hard, a crack in the family facade. The summit gained momentum, with guests posting viral videos that caught the eye of a Netflix exec who offered Leo a documentary deal. My phone buzzed with notifications. Media outlets wanted interviews, and a TED Talk organizer reached out, but the threats didn't stop. A third note appeared, tucked into my coat. "You can't outrun the past." The handwriting matched the others, but the message felt personal, tied to secrets I didn't yet understand. On the final day, my parents returned with Elizabeth, their faces a mix of guilt and defiance. "We want to help clean up," Victoria said, her tone forced. I led them to the garden, where the pines cast long shadows. "This isn't about space," I said, my voice steady. "You've sidelined me for years, dismissed my work, invited Ryan to hurt me." Charles looked away, then met my eyes. "You're right. We wanted you to be like your siblings. We were wrong." The admission was a seismic shift, but I wasn't ready to forgive. "I'm hosting this summit again," I said. "You can join, but on my terms." Margaret joined us, her voice cutting through the tension. "I've spoken to the trust lawyer. The estate's yours for 1 week each year, Sophia, to honor your grandparents' vision." My parents froze, their control slipping. Elizabeth's eyes widened. "You're giving her the estate?" Margaret smiled, sharp and unyielding. I'm giving her what she's earned. As we returned to the chalet for the closing circle, guests shared their breakthroughs, collaborations formed, dreams ignited. Charles spoke, his voice unsteady. I didn't understand your world, Sophia. I want to. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. As guests departed, Claire hugged me, tears in her eyes. This changed me, she said. I'm done living for their approval. Daniel lingered, helping load my car. I'm sorry, he said, for not seeing you. I saw the boy he'd been, before our parents' expectations crushed him. We can do better, I said. Alone on the terrace, I watched the sun sink behind the peaks, the weight of the week settling in. The coded notes, the stolen prototype, the trust clause. They were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't solved, but I'd built something unstoppable. A legacy born from rejection. Back in Seattle, therapy helped me unravel the years of hurt. Dr. Lee's words echoed. You didn't just create a summit, you created yourself. The summit's success rippled. New clients, speaking gigs, a community that saw me. Margaret's lawyer confirmed the trust clause, securing my week at the Whistler estate. As I planned next year's summit, I knew the fight wasn't over. Ryan's pitch loomed, the coded threats lingered, and my family's wounds ran deep. But standing in my loft, the skyline glittering, I felt unshakable. I'd turned their no room into an empire of my own, and no one, not my parents, not Ryan, not the shadows, could take that away.